kindly advised that she may have to leave us for a time and then return to the meeting for personal reasons. I welcome members of the management team, Superintendent Eberwin, Assistant Superintendent McKenzie, Secretary Treasurer Reed, Director of Instruction Braniff, and Director of Instruction Hunter. And of course, I also welcome our partner group representatives. We believe that for the Confederation of Parents Advisory Councils of Saanich, Ms. Sanowski will be appearing. For CUPE. Ms. Nola Welsh is here. Welcome. For the Saanich Teachers Association, Mr. McEwen has indicated he will attend, but may be a little bit tardy because of another obligation. And representing the school, the Saanich Administrators Association, Ms. Ray Dennett. Secretary Treasurer Reed, we are recording this meeting, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. And of course, I wish to acknowledge that we are meeting this evening on the traditional territory of the WSÁNEĆ peoples who have lived, learned, and worked here since time immemorial, that we offer this acknowledgement gratefully and respectfully, and that we offer it in recognition of the need for and in pursuit of reconciliation with our Indigenous peoples. Moving to the adoption of the agenda, is there a motion that the agenda be adopted, please?
Graham?
I move, Trustee Dunford.
Thank you, Trustee Martin. Is there a seconder?
I'll second, Trustee Van Wel.
Trustee Van Wel. Are there any late items or proposed revisions? All right, all in favor of adopting the motion as circulated? Opposed? Motion's carried. The agenda is adopted. Thank you. Prior to this meeting, the board held an in-camera meeting and discussed personnel matters. Moving to item 3, adoption of board meeting minutes. First, the meeting minutes of October 2021. Trustees, are there any errors or omissions to the minutes of October 20, 2021? Hearing none, I declare the minutes be adopted as circulated. Then the minutes of the annual general meeting of November 1, 2021. Are there any errors or omissions to the minutes of the annual general meeting? Hearing none, I declare that the minutes be adopted as circulated. And third, the minutes of the special regular meeting of November 15, 2021. Are there any errors or omissions with respect to those minutes? Trustee McMurphy?
I may not remember correctly, but I think under item 2, adoption of the agenda, the motion to amend, not movement, sorry, motion to amend, I think I moved that, but I don't know who the seconder was.
I don't remember either, Trustee McMurphy. Is there any objection to including Trustee McMurphy as the mover? Hearing none, I think we'll do that, Trustee McMurphy. Minutes will be amended in that respect. Does anyone remember who seconded that?
I think it might have been Trustee Van Wel.
Are you okay with that, Trustee Van Wel? All right. Is there any objection to amending the minutes to include Trustee Van Wel as the seconder? All right. With those changes,
And it'll say motion, not movement, right?
Yep. Good thing you're on the ball.
Thank you.
You're spot on tonight, Trustee McMurphy. With those amendments to the minutes of November 15, unless there's any other objection, I declare them adopted as amended. There is no business arising from the minutes. There are no presentations, delegations, or questions this evening. Well, there may be questions. There are no presentations or delegations. Are there any questions from our partners or from members of the public who may be in attendance? Not hearing any response, we'll move to the next item, which is the report from the chair. And there are a number of matters I wish to report this evening. For our last regular meeting of 2021. First, with respect to all things strat plan, I wish to bring us current with respect to the strategic plan development process. Pursuant to the recommendations of the Strategic Plan Advisory Committee and Board direction, the school district embarked on consultation with certain constituencies in late October and early November, consisting of parent advisory councils, Indigenous communities with 2 meetings, and student voice at our secondary schools, as well as distributing and receiving responses to a survey which received a significant response. I thank trustees for their board representation and their sensitivity in their involvement in these meetings. I too note that an extensive summary was prepared by Assistant Superintendent Mackenzie and his staff, synthesizing the data into a detailed and comprehensive report, which was presented and considered at the SPAC meeting on November 25. And it's anticipated that recommendations from SPAC for further consultation and with respect to preparation of a draft plan will come in the context of the superintendent's report this evening. Last week saw 3 more atmospheric rivers assault the province. This came, of course, after the first one in mid-November, which dumped a month's worth of rain in 2 or 3 days on areas of the province. Greater Victoria was largely unscathed, but the Fraser Valley and the interior in various places were terribly affected. We think of and our hearts go out to the communities of Merritt, Princeton, Abbotsford, Chilliwack, and Sumas Prairie, and others. Loss of life, loss of livestock, homes, businesses, and transportation corridors were eliminated. Schools too have been affected. Many have been damaged, and those even which are functional, in some cases cannot access their staff because of the transportation issues. We know that the Ministries of Education and Transport are working very hard. I have participated in several chairs' calls on these issues, and the work is designed to reinstate the school programs and the access for students and teachers and support staff to them as soon as possible. Our board sent letters of support and condolences to some of the severely affected districts, including Chilliwack, Abbotsford, Fraser Cascade, and Nicholas-Similkameen, and they are contained in the board pack for your reference. I can advise that in one case, the chair responded thanking us, and in another case, the chair on a chair's call thanked all of those districts who had forwarded such letters. So fortunately, we're not alone in considering those less fortunate situations. On November 19, I was pleased to represent the board at the grand opening of the new Children's Development Center facility on Cordova Bay Road. Vice Chair Van Well and Trustee McMurphy were also able to attend, and I provided remarks for the event. From senior staff, Superintendent Eberwin, Director of Instruction Braniff, and Director Rob Lum attended as well. And we all expressed appreciation to the Ministry of Education and to Beacon Community Services for their long-standing relationship with the district and for their new partnership as it concerns the Neighborhood Learning Center at that site. We were then treated by a tour by Vice Principal Kenny, who had forgotten to provide Nanaimo bars but promised that he would do so the next time. The new facility is a bright spot in the district and a treasure in our work for vulnerable learners. December 8 has been designated as the board's semi-annual planning day. In the morning, we will be engaged in an Indigenous education theme facilitated by Principal Melissa Austin and staff, and in the afternoon to a board evaluation and effectiveness time led by the Director of Education Services from BCSTA, Mr. Gordon Lee. Tomorrow through Saturday, trustees will be engaging in the BC School Trustees Academy in Vancouver, the theme for which is Drawing Change, Reimagining Education. and this is the first large in-person meeting of BCSDA in 2 years. A number of us will be attending the workshops, speakers, and networking. The Vancouver Island School Trustees Association branch meeting will be held on Saturday morning. The BCPC annual general meeting, the BC Public School Employers Association, will be held January 27 and 28 in Vancouver, and Trustee Silzer, of course, is our BCPC representative. On behalf of the board, the chair and the vice chair annually meet with executive members of our partners to consider issues, concerns, suggestions, ideas, and do what we can to strengthen our relationships in our mutual regard. Trustee Van Well and I will be arranging these commencing in January. It's my sad duty to report that a long-term educator for our district, Judy Primrose, passed away on November 27. Her obituary was noted and was lovely in the Times Colonist today. Judy taught in Saanich for 41 years, principally at the Saanachton and Prospect Lake Elementary Schools. It's important also to acknowledge that she is the aunt of our own Lee Glancy and Ray Dennett, who are here tonight. And so we offer, on behalf of the board, our deepest condolences to her family, her husband Wayne, her children, and to Lee and to Ray. Our board annual general meeting was held November 1, 2021 for the election of board officers and representatives. And this year, Trustee McMurphy determined that she would not stand for the position of vice chair. And Trustee Van Well was elected by acclamation to that position in a subsequent meeting. I'm taking this opportunity to pay tribute to and acknowledge and thank Trustee McMurphy for her years of service as vice chair. They have been 6, 4 with former Chair Martin and 2 with me as chair. That's a considerable time to serve, especially through the issues that the board has grappled with during those times. And so I and we have valued Trustee McMurphy's leadership, experience, thoughtfulness, wisdom, strategies, and commitment to the board, to the Saanich District, and to public education throughout this time. This will embarrass her, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think a prominent mutual friend in public education said to me one time, and this captures, I think, Trustee McMurphy's talents so well. He said, "Tim, always listen to Elsie. You will not always agree with her, but she's always worth hearing." That has been my experience. And so, Trustee Elsie McMurphy, on behalf of the board and personally, I thank you for your many years of service to us, to the board and to the district as vice chair, and to the continuation of your work as a trustee.
Thank you, Chair.
And finally, friends, as we move to the end of a challenging but fulfilling school term and into Christmas and the holiday break, I wish trustee colleagues, executive staff, board support staff, partners, their members, and our students season's greetings, a restful time, our thanks, all to return refreshed in January to continue the work for student success. Thank you. That completes the report from the chair, and I'll turn to the report from the Superintendent of Schools. Superintendent? Dave, you're muted.
I sounded great to myself. Thank you very much. I have one item on my agenda, which is the report from the Spat Committee and the recommendations that came forth from there. I also want to, as the board chair has done, acknowledge Assistant Superintendent Mackenzie for his outstanding work in putting together a summary report. You'll see on the screen here that we received a tremendous amount of feedback Both on the e-survey, we had close to 1,700 responses. With the individual student meetings, there were 171 responses from Indigenous students, 392 from non-Indigenous. At the two Wasanish First Nation events, we collated 231 responses. And it was all done using not only an artificial intelligence tool, but using Mr. McKenzie's keen eyes and insights into how to group all of this and make sense of the data. And his report was simply outstanding that was presented to PAC. And we had a full 2 hours of going over the data. And as you will see it in the briefing note, not only was there an acknowledgement of the work that went in to try to collate and make sense of the responses that came back, there was overwhelming understanding that there was support for the three themes as identified at the beginning of this process. Those themes being literacy, Indigenous learner success, and mental health and wellness. And so the Spat Committee asked me to present a couple of recommendations that I hope I have captured accurately from the committee's perspective in terms of next steps moving forward. The committee felt quite strongly that we need to keep the momentum going in this process, that it was time to start to develop a first draft of a strategic plan for the board's consideration, and it would be that strategic plan draft that we would take out for further engagement with the community. I was also asked to put together a tentative engagement process and timeline for the board's consideration this evening, and I have done that in table number 2 that you will see on your screen as well. So the recommendations that I've drafted are as such: that the board direct the superintendent to work with a consultant to prepare a first draft strategic plan 2022 to 2027, which includes the 3 focus areas of literacy, Indigenous learner success, and mental health and wellness. That the strategic plan should be available in a first draft for the board's January 19th, 2022 public board meeting. And the second recommendation, that the board endorse a community engagement process following that process and timeline for review of this draft strategic plan as outlined below. I won't go through all of these, but I'll give you an indication as to how I put it together. Obviously, there is the board meeting on January 19th, and so engagement can't happen before we actually have a draft plan that is tentatively approved by the board to go out. And so it would be in that late January, February timeline that we would create a survey of an engagement process for the engagement process to engage feedback from people as to their thoughts on the draft plan. We would include emails out to parents and guardians. We would also use our social media accounts to ensure that the word was spread as far as possible. We would work with the Wasanish First Nation to figure out how to engage with them. As the board knows, they're currently in longhouse ceremonies and celebrations, and so I'm not sure what that process might look like, but it would be important to engage with them to find out what would be an appropriate and a respectful way to gauge their feedback. I also provided for the board's consideration this evening an invitation list that we used for the budget consultation last spring to ensure that we spread our net a little bit wider than just the groups that we've done so far. And that was included as an appendix 1 for your consideration. And it's the same list that it hadn't been altered at all from the budget consultations from last springtime. The first COPAX meeting after January 19th is on February the 10th, and that's why I've suggested that we have at least another couple of weeks after that to receive feedback on a survey. We would then meet in March with the Spat Committee to go over that feedback, and then hopefully have something ready for the regular board meeting in March for the board's consideration about that engagement process. And so that's a very quick overview of the recommendations and the proposed engagement and process and timeline. So I pass it back to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Trustees, questions, comments, thoughts as we work towards a couple of motions, perhaps? Trustee Stelk?
Thank you. I don't have a specific motion in mind, but I do remember at the SPAC meeting, we talked about the equity of success and opportunity, that might somehow be folded into the 3 focus areas. So it'd be nice to see that in there. And we also talked about the educated citizen, and where that might appear in the draft. So there may be other SPAC members or trustees that want to comment on that as well.
All right. Thank you. Trustee McMurphy and then Trustee Silzer.
Yeah, I've got a couple of amendments that I would like to propose, Chair.
Well, we don't have a motion yet.
Okay, well, I'll move the recommendation,
The
first
one?
recommendation in the following fashion. That the board requests, sorry, it says direct, that the board direct the superintendent to work with the consultant to prepare a first draft strategic plan 2022-2027, which includes 4 focus areas of literacy, Indigenous learner success, mental health and wellness, and citizenship.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Trustee, thank you, Trustee Martin. Trustee McMurphy.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I've gone through the feedback pretty carefully, and also reflecting the discussion that we had at SPAC as well. And I think if I go through and I find all these little threads, I draw them into a fabric called citizenship. And I realize that may sound fairly nebulous, but I think when we look at what's offered in the first 3, it tends to be specific to the individual student, whereas I think we need to have something that reflects the purpose of why we do all this for the individual student, and that is to develop, as Trustee Stelk said, the educated citizen. And it's the notion that our students need to acquire the skills and understanding that they have a role to play in the betterment of our society, whether that's dealing with things like climate change, which is, I'm sure, on the top of everybody's agenda right now with the effect of climate that we're seeing in our province at the moment, whether it's dealing with things like racism, or whether it's dealing with, you know, the notion of learning how to be socially responsible and getting along so that our society is more peaceful and more respectful. All of those things that could be called the greater good. I'm not sure, everybody probably has another way to describe it, but I found that the word citizenship to me seemed to cover the broad ground that I saw in a lot of the comments that were more specific, but I brought them together in that general heading. And I thought it would be very important that we have that kind of backdrop for our work, both in terms of our consultation with the community and with our work with students in schools, so they understand their responsibility and their role in our society.
Thank you. Trustee McMurphy, before I proceed with other speakers, did you intend to leave out the last sentence of the recommendation as to timing? Or
yes, that could be another motion. I'm just focusing on the strat plan itself, not the details of the timing.
On the content. All right, thank you. Trustee Martin and then Trustee Silzer.
Thank you, Chair Dunford. I'm sorry to have missed the Strategic Planning Committee meeting, and Trustee Van Well can probably speak to this as well. So at our school community meetings, this was raised at the Cordova Bay one, and I've had a couple people from the community reach out. Under the theme Indigenous Learner Success, under the evidence section, I move that we add the following statement. The evidence shows that our current system is in many ways not serving Indigenous students well. And then go from there. And the reason for that and the feedback that we got is really when you read the evidence, it really focuses on the student's lack of success versus the systemic reasons for why the students aren't succeeding. And so there's a different tone, and you'll remember, Trustee Van Well, it was raised at the meeting by someone who actually works in the Representative for Children and Youth office, and there's been a couple.
Just before you go ahead, let me make sure I understand your motion first of all, Trustee Martin, because I'm lost. Where did you intend? We have a motion before the board moved by Trustee McMurphy but are you proposing amendment to that?
No, I'm proposing another one. I'll hold
Uh,
mine then.
Okay, so we can come back to that. That may be better as a separate motion. Or what area were you referring to?
It's under the second goal under Indigenous learner success. Let's hold it, Chair Dunford. It's clearly confusing. I'll raise it as a separate motion and we'll deal with Trustee McMurphy's.
Okay, thank you for that. We want to be clear. Trustee Silzer?
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking against the motion, the amendment. Well, no, I'm speaking against the motion, including the educated citizen or the citizenship, a fourth point. And not because I don't think that citizenship is a theme that's important and that was perhaps raised between the lines in all the consultations, but because the educated citizen is the mandate of the Ministry of Education. And that is the umbrella under which all districts make their strategic plans. So each district, looking at the evidence of the student success and the areas of concern within the district, comes up with a plan to address those concerns. I don't think we have had any evidence that our students are falling down in the area of education on citizenship. I think we've had a plan for over a year now, year and a half actually, that has focused on the evidence within our district that literacy, Indigenous learner success, and mental health and wellness are three extremely important or focus areas for the board, the district to concentrate on. What we also discussed at the last strategic planning meeting was not that citizenship or the educated citizen would be another theme, but that perhaps in the preface of the draft strategic plan, that the context within which we're doing our strategic planning would include the educated citizen and the mandate of the Ministry of Education to produce educated citizens. So I think, you know, while I definitely do not quarrel with the idea of our district promoting that students become educated citizens, I think we should stick with the focus of these three areas and within the draft strategic plan, incorporate that overarching goal of the whole education system to produce educated citizens. So, yeah, that's all I'll say for now.
Thank you. Trustee McMurphy for a second time.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I don't disagree with anything that Trustee Silzer just said in general, because I think what she says is valid. What I'm looking for is something specific in our strategic plan that says, yes, we know it's our responsibility and we're going to make sure that we are fulfilling that responsibility. And so it's a more of a direct action, translating those lofty goals into an awareness and specific actions on the ground in our schools with our students, so that they themselves are aware of why they're learning the skills that they're learning, so that they can practice them to make our world a better place.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the motion, trustees? Are you all clear on what it is, or do I have to state it? I think it's in the words of the recommendation in the superintendent's report, but adding the fourth goal, the educated of citizenship. All right, all in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. Opposed? Any opposed? The motion's carried. Thank you. Now, let's go to you, Trustee Martin, because you have a motion, I think. Can you give us your motion first?
Certainly. So the motion is under the theme Indigenous Learner Success to add at the beginning of the evidence section the following statement. The
Okay,
evidence-
let help me out because I don't know where we are in the report.
I think she's looking at the if I'm not mistaken, Trustee Martin, you're looking at the slide deck that was shared.
Yeah.
That was shared at SPAC, not my report this evening.
Yeah, the
Oh,
slide
okay.
deck that was shared.
Thank you. Just give me a moment, please, Trustee Martin. All right. Thank you. Proceed, please.
And so at the beginning of the evidence section, the following statement, the evidence shows that our current system is in many ways not serving our Indigenous students well. And then the rest of that. So it puts a weighting on the system not serving the students well, which is impacting Indigenous student success.
All right. So you wish to amend the report to include that statement. Is there a seconder for that? Trustee Van Wel? Trustee Martin, do you wish to speak to your motion further?
No, I mean, Trustee Van Well and it was quite a compelling case made by this one parent, but it really sparked a conversation that when you read this and you're not someone who's in the system, and these goals will be public facing and our public will be interacting with them, the message is that the failure is on the students. It's not on the system. And we all know really what we're trying to do with all of the goals and the investments is to start to write a system that is not been healthy or supportive of Indigenous student success. And actually, in many ways, it's gone out of its way to make sure students do not succeed, Indigenous students. So it's really kind of turning it on itself and actually making it a systemic issue versus an individual Indigenous student issue.
Thank you. Trustee Selzer?
I just question the process. Like, that isn't a document of the board, it's a background document. So why would we be changing the wording of the report writer? I don't understand that.
So
I guess I'm saying point of order, perhaps.
What do you say about that, Trustee Martin? I accepted your motion, but I'm wondering.
So I guess, I mean, this has been part of my frustration with this process. Those draft goals went out for consultation. This has come directly from our consultation. I wasn't able to be at strategic planning. It's to come in front of the board. It is feedback from community about the wording of one of our 3 strategic goals that were put out for consultation. So it is an amendment, a proposed amendment to the goal for a weighting. So I actually think it's well within the bounds of this board to be able to look at the wording of the draft goals. I don't think it's any more out of order than Trustee McMurphy adding a citizenship goal. Because
So Trustee Martin, you anticipate that if this passes, the revised wording would wind up in the strat plan in that context. That's the connection here, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because this is the first time we've had an opportunity to bring back feedback that, you know, it came to SPAC, but this is all part of our consultation process.
Okay.
And this is the first time it's coming to the board.
Trustee Selzer, on that basis, I will continue to accept the motion with the understanding that it's dealing with wording for the strategic plan, not just for the report. Trustee Selzer.
Yeah, well, wouldn't it be a more valuable use of our time to discuss the draft strategic plan once we have it? Because that background paper goes into the superintendent and the consultant's draft. So in a sense, even if we make if this motion passes, it makes no difference to the first draft of the strategic plan, perhaps, although perhaps that wording will be valuable and all that, but okay, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Stelk?
Thank you, Chair. It's an orientation towards this topic. I'm just wondering if you could please read it again where it comes in. I didn't write it down.
Yeah. Could you read it again, please, Trustee Martin?
Under the theme Indigenous Learner Success,
Mm-hmm.
to add at the beginning of the evidence section, so each of the strategic goals have an evidence section.
Mm-hmm.
At the very front of that section, add the following statement, and that the evidence shows that our current system is in many ways not serving Indigenous students well. And then the rest of the information that's there, it just follows that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee McMurphy?
I'm going to try a substitute motion.
Okay.
Amendment by substitution.
Yes.
I'm going to move as a replacement motion that the next draft of the strategic plan reflect in the Indigenous learner success theme the wording from Trustee Martin, which something about the reflect in the Indigenous learner success theme that the evidence shows that our current system is in many ways not serving Indigenous students well. Have I got it correct?
Yeah.
Yes. All right. I think
so that takes it out of the. I think that addresses. Oh, sorry. I need a seconder.
Yeah. Is there a seconder for that? Trustee Stelk.
I think that I understand both Trustee Martin's concern and Trustee Silser's concerns, and this kind of takes it out of the specific document that wasn't directly in front of us, but puts it directly in front of us in the next draft of the strat plan. I hope that satisfies both.
I'm happier with that because the reason I accepted it was because I anticipated it would wind up in the draft plan, and now this amendment, if it passes, ensures that. Trustee Martin?
Yeah, Chair, I'm really confused I support the amended motion or substitution motion. I think my concern is we as a board have not looked at the draft goals. So we agreed to the time frame and they've gone out. So I guess my question to you as Chair is when will the board be discussing the draft goals? Because right now we went out for consultation. I recognize process, but I'm missing something because when will that come in front of the board? I understand the superintendent sent a report and I get that, but when will the board be discussing the wording of the 3 draft goals as presented to our community?
Well, if this motion passes this evening, then we have to deal with a timing issue, but based on this motion, staff would prepare the draft plan for board consideration. And that would be the time we would deal with it. I think what you're actually doing, Trustee Martin, excuse me, is stepping back a bit. And we're at the point where we have a motion before the board directing them to prepare a draft plan with these goals. And then when the draft plan ultimately comes to the board will be able to revise, accept, pick and choose, suggest, and what have you. But that's my understanding. That's my answer to your question. So I'll go now to Trustee Silser.
Thank you, Chair. I'm fine with Trustee McMurphy's draft amendment, except that it's not the next draft, it's the first draft of the strategic plan. We don't have a draft strategic plan yet. So that would be my only comment to that.
All right, so thank you. The motion, as I understand it, passed as a first. I think, Trustee Silzer, I think that was the wording of the motion, a first draft.
Yes, Chair Dunford, it was first.
All right, thank you. So if I'm
Should have said
talking,
first.
yeah, if I'm talking about next or something, I don't mean it that way. I mean first. So let's go back to Trustee McMurphy's proposed amendment in substitution for Trustee Martin's motion. There are three ways to amend. One is to delete, one is to add, and one is to substitute. Are there any trustees?
Sorry, are we agreed that I said first, not next?
I think we are.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Are there any further comments, discussion, or debate on the proposed amendment by substitution? All right, all in favor? Opposed? And the amendment by substitution carries. Mr. Reed, do we have to call a vote on it then? I think we passed it, right? Yeah, no, thank you, we're done.
No, you do have to have a vote on the motion as amended.
That's what I'm thinking of. All right. Trustees, is there any further debate on the motion that has now been amended, which is identical to what we just passed? All in favor? Opposed? The motion's carried. Thank you. The other issue before we get to the community engagement process is timing of provision of the first draft plan. Does anyone have a motion? Trustee McMurphy.
I move that that staff be requested to prepare the first draft of the strategic plan for the board's consideration at the January 19th, 2022 public board meeting.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Trustee Silzer. Trustee McMurphy? Anybody wish to comment on the motion? All right, I'll put the question. All in favor? Opposed? The motion's carried. Thank you. Anything further before we turn to the community engagement process and timeline part of this? Trustee McMurphy.
I'm prepared to put it on the floor, Chair.
All right, could we have your motion, please?
You can have my motion. It reads slightly different than what's there. That the board approve the community engagement. The board endorse a community engagement process and timeline for review of the draft strategic plan as outlined below. And as outlined below, I would move it as it is, except for the very last box, which says March 16th, 2022, regular public board meeting. The board considers SPAC recommendations, period. And the second bullet is deleted.
The further work by executive staff would not be there. All right, thank you. Trustees, you clear on that motion? Is there a seconder? Trustee Van Well. Trustee McMurphy, do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, I am. I'll speak specifically to the part I left out. And that is, I think we need to adopt our strategic plan, if at all possible, in March. And the reason I'm saying that is that we've got a whole lot of things coming down the pike at us, including our budget preparation and consultations. And I think having done all this work, we need to be genuine in our when we go out to talk with our communities. And we've got a public community budget meeting on April. When is it, Jason? March 28th, I think. Is that the date of it?
Pardon me?
When's, well, here, I've got it here, just a minute, I'll tell you, it's,
If it's the
yes, it's April 14th is the public budget meeting. So I think that at our March at our March meeting, we have to wrap up our strat plan if at all possible. I mean, it may not be possible, but I think we should try and make that our goal so that when we go out to our public in the following month, we'll have something to take to them. I don't think we can carry on, bring it to the board prior to the end of April, and then, you know, who knows? I think we need to shorten our timeline a little bit here and get ready and get it implemented.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion approving the consultation engagement process and timeline. I'll put the question then in the wording of the motion as presented by Trustee McMurphy, which is identical to the report, save and except for the last part in the last bullet in the last box. All in favor? Opposed? And the motion's carried. Thank you.
I just had one question, Chair, on it.
Yes.
It says for the broader community engagement, it says community email. Is that the only way it's anticipated that we are going to be engaging with our broader community?
Superintendent?
Well, that would be for the board to discuss. That's what I had anticipated with regards to reaching out at this point in time with the survey link to the draft strategic plan to get the feedback back that way. But if there are other options that the board would like to consider, I suppose that's open for consideration as well.
Trustee Selzer?
Thank you, Chair. In Appendix 1, I just wanted to add, I suppose that this list of community groups is open to additions, and one group that I see is not, there are two groups actually, would be the, is it the Saanich 55 Plus Association that has an affiliation with the Cordova Bay Elementary School. And also the Saanich Peninsula chapter of the Canadian Federation of University Women, who have a particular, have over the years been particularly attentive to the Independent Learning Center, Individual Learning Center. They've supported it in many ways.
Trustees, is there any objection to adding those two groups to the list, Appendix 1? Done.
What was the name of the second one, Trustee Silzer? I'm sorry.
The Canadian Federation of University Women, Saanich Peninsula chapter.
Thank you.
Trustee McMurphy.
Just going back to my initial question about community email. I know that right now we have no idea what kind of in-person engagements we're going to be able to have in the coming months. But I'm assuming that if the opportunity does arise for there to be some in-person discussions, that would be all right, would it, Chair?
I think it would be. I don't think that this plan precludes that unless anyone disagrees with that.
I'm just thinking that, you know, people may not respond to an email, but if one of us were to phone the leading representative of those organizations and say, hey, we sent you an email, any chance that you could give us some feedback, might encourage a greater response.
I think there has to be an element of flexibility and good judgment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Before we leave,
Nola, you get in touch with CFUW.
Will do.
Okay.
Who's going to do 55 plus at Cordova Bay? All right. Before we leave the strategic plan, are there any other questions, motions, any other business that we need to deal with to direct staff further in the matter? Trustee McMurphy?
Because of the way our rules work, I kind of moved right into moving the motions and whatnot, but I did want to take a moment to acknowledge all the work that has got us so far down the road toward the development of a strategic plan. I know that many staff have done many things, as well as we've had Great work done by our trustee representatives on SPAC, and I just want to acknowledge that. I would have liked to have done it before, but I know the rules are you got to put the motion on the floor before you speak. So anyway, thanks everybody.
Well, thank you, Trustee McMurphy. I see heads nodding, and I'm sure that the board joins with you in expressing gratitude and thanks as you have. Mr. Superintendent, do you have anything further in your report?
No, that concludes my report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and thank you for your leadership again with respect to SPAC and with respect to developing this detail that now is a roadmap for further consultation leading to the first draft and leading to the final adoption in the spring. For school successes, trustees will note they're attached. Let's move into the committee reports. Item 9, the Education Directions Committee, please. Committee Chair McMurphy.
Oh, just a sec. I'm trying to get my papers all reorganized here. Okay. No motions to report, Chair. Just we had two very compelling presentations, one on the elementary tool cart project and the other on global solutions at Claremont Secondary. The tool cart project was featured, the school was featured was Sydney Elementary, but I gather the tool carts going around the district. Both of these are innovative and powerful opportunities for kids to learn in different ways and apply their skills in a very concrete fashion. And we extended our appreciation to all the teachers and district staff who were involved in creating these opportunities and practicing these skills and then bringing them to our attention.
Thank you.
Now, oh, and the provincial online learning school application was also reviewed by Assistant Superintendent Paul McKenzie. Thank you, Paul.
Yes, it was. Thank you, Trustee McMurphy. Finance, Facilities and Technology Committee Chair Vanwell, please.
Thank you. Before I go through the committee's report, I would like to offer my thanks to Trustee Martin for the last 2 years in the role of chair for this committee. She did a wonderful job, and we are very grateful to her in doing so. So on that note, I have some items for recommendation from the committee. We'll start off with the dissolution of business company. The committee recommends, and I, Trustee Vanwell, move that on behalf of the Board of Education, the Secretary Treasurer is directed to 1, sign under seal a release of all debt of Saanich International Distributed Learning Services, Inc. to School District Number 63 Saanich for no consideration, and 2, resolve in a meeting of the School District 63 Business Company that the School District Number 63 Business Company be dissolved.
Second, Trustee McMurphy. Do you wish to speak to that, Trustee Vanwell?
Well, it does speak for itself. I'll just mention that this is a continuation of the September 21st motion to dissolve the business company.
Thank you. Any further debate or discussion on the motion, trustees? I'll put the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried.
So moving on to the second motion. The committee recommends, and I, Trustee Vanwell, move that the 2022-23 budget guiding principles and the 2022-23 timelines/process be approved.
Second. Trustee McMurphy. Any discussion or debate on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you.
Thanks. The third motion, the committee recommends, and I, Trustee Vanwell, move 1, that the board approve the statement of financial information for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2021, and 2, that the board express to the Provincial Comptroller General the need to review the threshold limits for the SOFI report.
Second. Trustee McMurphy.
Can we
Any-
deal with them seriatim, please?
Yes, all right, we'll deal with the first one. Is
I'll
there a
second.
seconder for the first motion that the board approve the statement of financial information, SOFI, for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2021? Trustee McMurphy. Does anyone wish to speak to that motion? All right, all in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Then with respect to the second one, which has been moved by Trustee Van Well, that the board express to the Provincial Controller General the need to review the threshold limits for the SOFI report. Trustee McMurphy, are you seconding? All right. Trustee McMurphy seconds. Is there any debate or discussion on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Trustee Van Well.
Thank you. And the final motion, the committee recommends, and I, Trustee Van, will move that the board directs staff to prepare a report for review by the Finance, Facilities and Technology Committee that includes evaluation of options for additional parking facilities on the Quilsit school site and an analysis of available parking at Quilsit in comparison with other elementary schools in the school district, and that staff evaluate strategies with the school for before and after school traffic calming and parking alternatives.
Trustee McMurphy seconds. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Trustee McMurphy?
I was just going to say, I can't remember if we talked about this or not, but through you to the Secretary Treasurer, would you typically be letting North Saanich know that this is the motion that if we carry it, that we carried it?
Yes, I can. It is consistent with the request from North Saanich Council, and so I can communicate that this motion passed.
I thought they might like to know. And I also want to acknowledge, as the representative from COPAX reminded us, that the school has had a lot of discussions already, and we acknowledge and appreciate that, but I guess you keep striving for better.
Trustee Stella.
Thank you. I'm not opposed to the motion, but I'd just like to, and I unfortunately I wasn't part of the discussion for this, that we don't lose sight of the fact that I think there's a lot of work to be done to encourage students to take the bus, to sort of beef up how we advertise the busing, so that, and for parents, and that on the education side, alternative ways to get to school. So I hope that isn't lost as we pursue parking and sort of vehicle traffic access to the schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Stelk. Mr. Reid first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Trustee Stelk's comments reminded me that at the North Saanich Council meeting, Council also passed a motion directing staff at North Saanich to work with staff at the school district to explore options for alternative modes of transportation to work and active transportation. So that is something that we will be looking at.
So some reassurance there, Trustee Stelk. Thank you. Trustee McMurphy again.
Well, just to follow up on that, I was wondering if we should put something about busing in the motion somewhere. Staff evaluate strategies with the school for before and after school traffic calming, parking alternatives, and busing. Would that be useful?
I think it would make it clearer. Are you making that amendment, proposing that amendment?
Or could we just agree?
Does anyone object to that? Trustee Silzer.
Okay, then I'll move it.
Just a minute.
Well, let me just hear from Trustee Silzer first.
Okay, yeah, I would say if you put in busing, then you're not including active transportation. And I think the active transportation, the biking and walking, is just as important or more important than encouraging kids to get on the bus. So I like the motion the way it is. Thanks.
Or Trustee McMurphy, are you prepared to expand your proposed amendment to include a reference to active transportation?
Sure. Before and after school traffic calming, parking alternatives, busing and active, what is it called? Active transportation?
Yes.
Busing and active transportation. Active transportation modes. Is that the
All
correct
right.
terminology?
All right. I think that makes sense. Now, does that help you, Trustee Silzer, or do you still object?
No, that helps. Thanks.
Okay, so I take it, trustees, there's no objection to Trustee McMurphy's proposed amendment referencing busing and active transportation modes in the motion. All right, it's done. Back to the main motion as amended. Anything further on that?
Sorry, Chair Dunford, I didn't get a seconder for that. Was that?
And we actually did it by consensus.
Okay.
Ms. Clancy, so there wasn't a seconder.
It wasn't an amendment.
It wasn't an amendment in the conventional sense. It was a change
Perfect.
by agreement.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right, seeing no further hands with respect to the main motion with the agreed change, all in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Trustee Van Well, anything further?
Nothing. We just had an update on the funding and enrollment. Don't know why I couldn't say that. And that concludes my my report.
Thank you. Item 12, Policy Development Committee report with Committee Chair Stelk, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we discussed at committee policy 18, specifically with the recruitment and selection of senior staff, and that's going to be coming back to the January committee meeting to have some draft language that reflects the guiding principles of the former policy 5040. And then there is a couple of items for recommendation. One is policy 19, the accumulated operating surplus, and I'm not sure I want to explain this. I'm just wondering if the Secretary Treasurer could give us a brief overview of the suggested changes.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the changes to the accumulated operating surplus were in response to some recommendations from the Ministry of Education around including more specific policy around the purposes and use of accumulated operating surplus, and also clarifying the process for transfers between funds and including transfers from operating into local capital fund. I think a clarification in a few other areas that were already consistent with their practice as well.
Thank you. So the committee recommends, and I, Trustee Stelk, move that the board approve consideration of the proposed changes to policy 19, the accumulated operating surplus. And so the motion, the board has confirmed its consideration of.
No.
We'll stop just with that.
Stop there.
Yeah, the first motion, because the second is a notice of motion, I think, Trustee Stelk. Is there a seconder to the motion? Trustee Martin, thank you. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Trustee Stelk.
Thank you. So the notice of motion is, as the board has confirmed its consideration of proposed changes, I, Trustee Stelk, provide notice that at the February 16th, 2022 public meeting of the Board of Education, I will move the following motion: that policy 19, accumulated operating surplus, be approved.
Thank you.
Then the next item for recommendation is the SOGI policy 27. We received feedback from partners in schools to use more expansive and inclusive language. So the motion, I'll just swing right into the motion. As the required notice of motion has been given, I, Trustee Stelk, move that amendments to policy 27, sexual orientation and gender identity, be approved.
Second. Trustee Martin, any discussion or debate? All in favor? Any opposed? The motion's carried.
And that concludes the policy report.
Thank you, Committee Chair Stelk. Item 13 is reports from trustee representatives. Trustee Van Well, Provincial Council synopsis, please.
Yeah, so last month I attended the Provincial Council and we had 3 motions that were all 3 motions. We had discussed this at a previous board meeting and supported them all. And I'm happy to say that all 3 motions were approved unanimously. So all of the districts were in full favor of all 3 of these motions. And that's my report.
Well, thank you for that. Are there any other reports from trustee representatives? Trustee Silzer.
I wish to report, Chair, that on October 27th, I attended the Memorial Park Society board meeting on behalf of Trustee Stelk. And the most relevant thing for the board was that Councillor Heather Gartshaw reported on the Qualset traffic study, and that sparked conversation around the table about the traffic around the school. And that was interesting. And then on October 25th, I attended the BCPC Zoom meeting regarding upcoming teacher bargaining.
Thank you, Trustee Seltzer. Anything else, trustees, under this item? Fine, let's then move to correspondence. Secretary Treasurer Reid.
Chair, there's one letter in correspondence that was received from Linda Phillips with regards to equestrian access on subways.
Okay. Trustees have that in the pack. Is there any discussion with respect to that correspondence? Right, thank you. Is there any other correspondence, Mr. Reid?
No.
Okay. All right, that moves us then to item 15, which is the second question period of the evening. Are there any questions from partner representatives or our guests? Hearing none, we'll move then to adjournment unless there's any objection.
Chair, just a question. Should we have moved receipt of that correspondence, or do we just stay silent? Usually don't we move receipt?
Mr. Reid, I remember reading something in Roberts not too long ago about that being meaningless, but I'm not the expert. Mr. Reid?
Yeah, it's not necessary to move receipt of reports, and the board at one time moved to receipt of committee reports and determined that was no longer necessary.
But we're talking about correspondence, Mr. Reid.
Well, I think anything it has been received by the board. It was on the agenda. It isn't necessary to move a motion that it be received.
Okay, thank you.
That accords with my meager understanding of the rules. Thank you, trustees. Is there any objection to adjourning the meeting at this time? Hearing none, I declare the meeting adjourned at 8:10 p.m. and I thank you all for your attendance and participation and wish you a good evening. Trustees, you'll recall that we are about to resume our recessed in-camera meeting. So after we adjourn this, we'll see you back there momentarily.
We have 5 minutes?
5 minutes. See you in 5 minutes. That would put us at about 8:15.